Today is Tuesday, March 24th, 2026, and today is National Cheesesteak Day, which is one of those holidays where the calendar seems less concerned with symbolism and more concerned with making sure everyone remembers lunch. Welcome to This Day in History from, wait, that's random. I'm your host, C.L. Burns. On this date in 1603, Queen Elizabeth I died at Richmond Place in England. Her death marked the end of the Tudor dynasty, which had ruled England for more than a century. Elizabeth had reigned for 44 years and presided over what many historians call the Elizabethan Age, a period of exploration, expanding trade and cultural growth. Shakespeare wrote many of his plays during this era, and England began establishing itself as a major maritime power. But Elizabeth never married and never named a direct heir. That created a succession question. The solution was political rather than familial. When Elizabeth died, the crown passed to James VI of Scotland, who then became James I of England. For the first time, the crowns of England and Scotland were held by the same monarch. The two countries were still technically separate kingdoms, but this moment began what the historians called Union of the Crowns, which slowly pushed the two nations toward a closer political alignment. Sometimes a single death quietly rearranges the balance of power across an entire region. Nearly 3 centuries later, another moment of change happened on the other side of the Atlantic. On March 24, 1883, the Brooklyn Bridge opened to traffic in New York City. At the time, it was one of the largest suspension bridges ever built and a major engineering achievement. The bridge spans the East River, connecting Manhattan and Brooklyn. Before the bridge existed, people had to rely on ferries to travel between the two cities, which could be slow, crowded, and sometimes dangerous in rough water. The real engineering breakthrough of the Brooklyn Bridge was its steel cable suspension system. Thousands of individual steel wires were bundled together to create massive cables that supported the roadway. Steel was stronger and more flexible than the iron that earlier bridges had used, allowing engineers to build much longer spans without collapsing under their own weight. The bridge also used enormous stone towers anchored deep in the riverbed to carry the weight of the cables. It was an impressive structure. So impressive, in fact, that some people decided to start selling it. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, con artists would approach tourists and recent immigrants and claim that they owned the Brooklyn Bridge. They would offer to sell it for a fee, promising the buyer that it could make money by charging tolls to cross it. And surprisingly, some people believed them. Victims would hand over money, only to discover that the seller had disappeared. The scam became so common that police occasionally had to remove people who tried to set up toll booths on the bridge after buying it, which is where the phrase comes from. If you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. Sometimes a technological marvel also becomes an opportunity for human creativity, just not always the good kind. Now we fast forward to March 24th, 2001. Apple released Mac OS X, a completely redesigned operating system for Macintosh computers. This was a major shift for Apple. Early Macintosh systems were built on software architecture that dated back to the 1980s. As computers became more complex, the old system struggled with stability and security. Mac OS X solved this by switching to a Unix-based foundation. Unix is a type of operating system architecture designed to handle multiple tasks and processes reliably. Instead of letting programs directly control hardware resources, Unix-based systems manage everything through layers of permissions and process scheduling. That structure makes the system much more stable. If one program crashes, it usually doesn't bring the entire computer down with it. Mac OS X also introduced a new graphical interface called Aqua. With translucent windows, smooth animations, and the dock interface that Mac users still recognize today. In many ways, the modern Mac experience began with this release. And speaking of things that seem impossible, Harry Houdini was born on this day in 1874. Houdini became the most famous escape artist in the world. He specialized in acts where he could be locked in handcuffs, chains, crates, or water tanks, and then somehow free himself. Part of the secret behind Houdini's performances wasn't supernatural ability. It was meticulous preparation. He studied lock mechanisms, practiced breath control, and trained his body to slip restraints. He also understood psychology. Many of his escapes relied on convincing audiences that something was impossible before revealing that it wasn't. Which, when you think about it, isn't that different from a really good illusion or a really good scam involving a famous bridge. Looking at these moments together, you can see a pattern in how humans deal with power and control. A queen dies and two kingdoms suddenly share a ruler. A massive bridge reshapes a city, and a few opportunists try to sell it. And a new operating system quietly reorganizes how millions of computers behave. Different centuries, different technologies. The same basic idea keeps showing up. Systems change, and people adapt to them. Anyway, those are a few things I ended up discovering while wandering through March 24th. Stop by tomorrow and we'll see what other strange corners of history the next date decides to uncover. If you want to know more about me or the work I do, you can find everything at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and I appreciate you stopping by.